Let's talk about culture. Not the culture at large where we're all living, but the culture of perhaps your organization or your family or a community that you're heavily involved in. And I'm not going to attempt to cover all the bases of culture because it is a nuanced and broad topic. What I am going to invite you to do today is to consider that culture is perhaps more caught than taught. We impart culture without even knowing it by our actions, our attitudes, our behaviors. And in some ways, these aspects of culture are invisible to us as the leaders or the stewards of the culture. They're not invisible to everyone else. There's the visible aspects that we're all clear on, and you can see on anybody's website, what's the mission? What's the vision? What are the values? And maybe our strategies are on there. And those are great, and those are really important. But oftentimes in organizations, people's actual behaviors are not aligned to the mission, vision, and values. And how often are values even part of the regular review process for an employee or for a leader? There are so many different aspects of culture, but for the purpose of this video, I want to just look at one or two of them. Let's use feedback as an example. Oftentimes when I'm working in a company, I'll ask something simple like, tell me about the feedback in your organization. How do you relate to feedback? How do you handle feedback? And 9 times out of 10, people will give me what I'm going to call the right answer about how great feedback is, how important it is, and feedback is really valuable, etc. And then I might ask, great, so you must be giving and receiving quite a lot of feedback in your culture. That's so exciting. Tell me how that works. And then silence. It's an opportunity to notice we actually don't have these mechanisms in place. We have mental assent that, for example, something like feedback is a good idea, and I know the thing I'm supposed to say about it, but in reality, I don't give it, I don't ask for it. And my private conversation about feedback is it's difficult, it's challenging, it's scary, it's judgment, I don't want it. If I get it, it means I'm wrong or bad or there's a problem. That's just one way I've noticed the culture itself is really, for example, an anti-feedback culture, even though the stated or visible part on the website or on the boardroom wall will say, oh, this is one of the values, this is important, clear, kind, honest communication. And in reality, we don't always equip people to live out the values or to measure them in a tangible way when they're looking at employee performance reviews. Communication is arguably one of the most important parts of any culture. How do we communicate? What do we communicate? What's the frequency of communication? Who gets included in our communication and who doesn't get included? And how do we have our meetings and set our agendas? And a big part of communication has to do with intention. What is the purpose of our communication? How are we including specific people or not? Have we invited or even asked people if they want to be included in this communication or that communication? Who has a seat at the table to have a voice into a specific aspect or project? Or does everybody have the same voice into any project? Communication is really, really tricky.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
Most people don't do it well, self-included. I think I've communicated things quite often that I've never actually said out loud. Or maybe I've said it out loud once or twice, but it didn't really get heard in the midst of the other noise or the other things going on. So how do we intentionally communicate and maybe even over-communicate as leaders to the people that are looking to us for vision casting? And this brings us back to feedback. Part of communication that's really critical is feedback. If people don't have feedback, if they're not getting feedback, asking for feedback, if there's no mechanism set up for healthy, constructive feedback that is aligned with vision in an organization, you're going to get a lot of confusion and a lot of discouragement. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to in their 20s and 30s that are begging for feedback.
I need feedback.
They're asking for feedback, for mentorship in their organizations. They say, I don't know, I ask, and they say everything's fine, and I don't know where to go from there, which I think also leads into this idea of employee engagement. What type of culture are you building, and how engaged are the people that are working there? Some of the recent stats that have come out on employee engagement are painful. Employee engagement overall is probably at an all-time low. And what is it that engages people? Number one is connecting to purpose. Number two is having feedback, having the ability to be challenged and grow and get better at the thing they came there to do. Number four is see a path. What is the path? Where am I headed? What's possible for me in this organization? Are these relationships that I'm in at work fulfilling? Are people kind and honest? Do people listen to each other? How are you communicating with your employees? How engaged are they, and do you know how engaged they are? What kind of feedback do you give or not give on a regular basis? How have you normalized feedback? And oftentimes what is natural is for leadership to impart their own preferences all the way down the line. If the leader of the organization loves feedback, you're going to find more feedback. If they don't love feedback, if they resist feedback, you're not going to find much of it. Back to culture is more caught than taught. As a leader in my organization, I have blind spots. You have blind spots. We all have them. Don't kid yourself. Your blind spots are being transmitted through the culture, whether you like it or not. So feel free to resist all you want. It's still happening. We can't help it. The things we don't want to see about ourselves are somehow getting communicated down the line as things to be tolerated, things that are normal, things that are permissible in the organization. So again, leaders, get a coach, get feedback into your blind spots, because it makes a huge difference in the direction that your organization is heading. So when you think of culture as being more caught than taught, what's being caught? What are you contagious with in your organization? And do you know? Do you want to know? And what would happen if you chose to become more aware of what you were spreading throughout the organization? If this was helpful for you, I have another video for you that I think would be a great follow-up for this one. What you resist persists, courtesy of Carl Jung. Whatever it is that you don't want to see, you are naturally propagating, unconsciously and constantly. Please give me a like, subscribe, make a comment. I'd love to hear more about how this applies to you and where you're at.